Welcome to episode 15 of the Ulysses Unlocked podcast, where we summarize the Telemachus episode of Ulysses by James Joyce. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to support us. Okay, so let's get into this deep dive. We're tackling the very first chapter of James Joyce's Ulysses, Telemachus.
Yeah, right. Episode 1. And, for a lot of people trying to read Ulysses, this first hour, this first chapter, it can feel like a brick wall, can't it?
It really can. It's famously difficult,
Yeah.
but you just can't skip it. It's absolutely foundational.
Completely. We're not just going to give you a plot summary today. The idea is to really dig in and pull out the stuff you need, the context, the characters, the literary echoes Joyce packs in right from these opening pages. It all sets the stage for 1904 Dublin and the whole book.
That's the mission then, because trying to jump into Ulysses later without getting this first bit, well, you'd be totally lost.
Yeah, you really would. This first chunk, it lays down the whole sort of emotional, philosophical, even the political scaffolding for everything else. It is dense, no doubt about it. But once you start unlocking the symbols and references, it's also, incredibly sharp, funny, and actually quite moving, too.
And the main character we're following here, Stephen Dedalus, he's not exactly new, is he? We've met him before.
Right. If you've read Joyce's earlier novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, he's carrying all that baggage. He's come back to Dublin after trying to make it as an artist in Paris, which didn't really work out.
Came back just in time for his mother's death, didn't he?
Exactly. So he's back, he's broke, he feels like a failure, he's kind of spiritually lost, and he's absolutely drowning in guilt about his mother.
That's a heavy load to start with.
It really is. And that whole mix, the artistic ambition, tangled up with this emotional paralysis that really defines these first 3 episodes. Critics call them the Telemachus, focusing on Stephen.
And Joyce doesn't exactly ease you in, does he? You need to know a fair bit right away.
He really demands it. You need some sense of the history, what Dublin was like under British rule back then, and you definitely need to catch the literary stuff, the echoes of other books that frame who Stephen is and what he's going through.
Okay, so let's talk about those echoes. They're pretty significant, aren't they? 2 big ones stand out immediately.
Huge ones. First, there's the Homeric parallel. The title itself, Telemachus, points straight to the Odyssey. Stephen is being set up as Telemachus, Odysseus' son.
Who's stuck at home while his father's away, dealing with all those suitors who've basically taken over the place, the usurpers.
Precisely. And Stephen sees himself as surrounded by usurpers, too. We'll get into who they are. So that's one layer.
And the second big one.
Shakespeare. Specifically Hamlet. Stephen's got that same kind of deep philosophical angst as Prince Hamlet. He's wrestling with grief, with feeling dispossessed, questioning fathers and inheritance. All very Hamlet.
But, and this seems important, the source material points out Joyce is playing with this comparison, right? Stephen isn't exactly a hero like Telemachus or Hamlet.
Not at all. And that's where Joyce gets clever, twisting that classical structure. Stephen is, as you said, a Telemachus deprived. He doesn't have the royal lineage. His mother's dead. He actively avoids his actual father, Simon Dedalus.
Who's flawed, to say the least.
Very flawed. And his homeland, Ireland, is under colonial rule and bondage, as Stephen sees it. Plus, crucially, he's refused to serve the church, the only God he really knows.
So the comparison highlights what he lacks.
Exactly. Joyce uses the grand comparison to show just how, shabby and limited this modern Dublin reality is compared to the old myths. Stephen's a symbolic son, sure, but definitely not a traditional hero. He's stuck in the grime.
Okay, so that's Stephen Dedalus. Intellectual, moody, sharp Buck calls him Kinch later, like a knife blade.
Right.
And he's clearly not starting June 16th, 1904 on a high note. Let's jump right into that opening scene. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, June 16th, 1904, Bloomsday, as it would become known. And the setting is very specific. The roof platform of this old Martello Tower in Sandy Cove, looking out over Dublin Bay.
A real historical place.
Yeah.
Built by the British to defend against Napoleon.
And the novel just throws us straight into this scene that must have been incredibly shocking at the time. It's pure religious blasphemy, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And what an entrance for Buck Mulligan. The first description. Stately, plump, Buck Mulligan. Those 2 words, stately and plump, right next to each other. It's instant irony.
Stately suggests dignity, maybe reverence.
And plump just pulls the rug out from under it, brings it right down to the physical, the slightly ridiculous. Joyce is signaling immediately. Nothing is sacred here, not even the opening sentence.
So Buck Mulligan, described as this witty, kind of crude medical student, he comes out onto the roof wearing a yellow dressing gown.
And that yellow color isn't accidental either. Think about Christian art. Yellow is often the color of Judas, of betrayal, deceit.
And he's holding a shaving bowl full of lather and a razor, and he crosses them over his head like a priest would with the chalice and paten during Mass.
He's doing a full-on parody of the Catholic Mass. He even chants the opening Latin words, Introibo ad altare Dei, I will go unto the altar of God.
It's incredibly provocative for Catholic Ireland in 1904.
Hugely provocative.
Huh.
And it's just the start. He uses his medical student knowledge to give this sort of crude chemical explanation for transubstantiation, like just soda bicarb.
So it's all calculated to get a reaction, especially from Stephen.
Definitely. It immediately sets up Mulligan as this, flippant, cynical materialist, which is the complete opposite of Stephen, who's tangled up in these deep philosophical and spiritual knots.
And when Stephen comes up, Mulligan treats him almost like something unclean, making the sign of the cross over him.
Yeah, jokingly exercising him. And he calls him Kinch, which Buck says means knife blade, playing on Stephen's sharp intellect. But Stephen's reaction to this whole performance, he's just coldly displeased and sleepy.
He's seen it all before. He's not impressed.
He's over it. But he's trapped there. And right here, this is where Joyce does something revolutionary with the writing. He just slides us right inside Stephen's head.
How does that happen?
Well, Stephen's watching Mulligan showing off, right?
Yeah.
And he notices Mulligan's teeth, the gold fillings glinting. And then, just inside Stephen's thoughts, this single, very learned Greek word appears. Chrysostomos.
Which means?
Golden-mouthed. It was an old title given to great speakers, famous orators, even Orthodox saints like St. John Chrysostom.
So it's Stephen's very intellectual kind of cutting assessment of Buck.
Exactly. It's judging Buck's verbal skill, his rhetoric, and literally seeing the gold in his teeth. And that one word, just appearing there without any Stephen thought label, that's our first real taste of the stream of consciousness technique. We're directly inside Stephen's educated critical mind.
It signals to the reader straight away. Pay attention. You need to follow these internal thoughts, these dense associations, to really get what's going on. It's not just about the plot.
Not at all. It demands a different kind of engagement. And speaking of engagement, there's a third person up there in the tower. Haines.
Right, the Englishman. Introduced as the ponderous Saxon, an Oxford student.
And his presence immediately brings in that whole theme of colonialism. He's the colonizer, right there, living in Stephen's temporary home.
And Stephen's first thought about him is basically, how long is this guy staying?
Yeah, and that's loaded. It's not just about being annoyed with a roommate. There's a real backstory here, based on Joyce's own experience sharing that tower with Oliver St. John Gogarty, who Mulligan is based on, and an Englishman named Trench.
What happened in real life?
Well, the story goes that Trench had nightmares, raved about a Black Panther, and actually fired a gun in the tower. Joyce felt threatened and left. So in the novel, Stephen remembers Haines having a similar nightmare, ranting about shooting a Black Panther.
And Haines has a gun case in the room?
Exactly. So it's not just abstract political pension. Stephen feels a real physical sense of menace from Haines, the Saxon. And he thinks to himself, if he stays on, here I am off. He's already planning his escape.
And the tower itself, you mentioned it was built by the British.
Yes, a military installation.
Okay.
And Stephen is literally paying rent for his room there to the Secretary of State for War, the British government.
So his very shelter is, as the source puts it, an emblem of that bondage.
Precisely. So right from the start, you've got this intense mix.
Yeah.
Religious conflict, intellectual sparring, and this heavy, suffocating political tension. It's all there on that tower roof at 8 a.m.
Okay, so the political tension is set. But maybe the deepest conflict for Stephen personally is psychological, isn't it? It all comes back to his mother's death.
Absolutely. That event, which happened about a year before this day, is the source of so much of Stephen's current state. His guilt, his feeling stuck, his alienation.
And it centers on his refusal to pray for her.
Yes. Stephen, who had already declared his break from the Catholic Church, famously saying, non serviam, I will not serve, back in these lie. A portrait he saw playing then as a betrayal of his own principles, a lie. So he refused to kneel and pray at his dying mother's bedside, even when she asked him to.
A monumental decision for him.
Huge! It secured his intellectual and artistic freedom, in a way. But the cost was this crushing, ongoing remorse.
And he has a specific, very literary name for this guilt, doesn't he?
He does. He calls it agenbite of innit, which isn't modern psychological jargon. It's Middle English.
Meaning?
Literally, again, biting of inner knowledge, or just remorse of conscience. What's striking is how Stephen intellectualizes it. He takes his very personal, raw grief and frames it within this grand historical theological context. He universalizes his own pain.
And who's the one person guaranteed to twist that knife?
Buck Mulligan, of course. He brings up the mother's death with this cruel casualness, saying his own aunt thinks Stephen actually killed his mother by refusing to pray.
That's brutal.
It is. And Mulligan tries to dismiss Stephen's feelings from his own perspective as a medical student who sees death all the time. He calls death just a beastly thing, something clinical, and then he throws that line at Stephen. Oh, it's only Dedalus whose mother is beastly dead.
Ouch. That word only must have stung.
Deeply. Stephen thinks internally that the real offense wasn't just disrespecting his mother, it was Mulligan minimizing his grief, the weight of his decision, with that dismissive only. It shows how isolated Stephen feels. His supposed friend is just using his deepest wound for a cheap shot.
And this grief isn't just an idea for Stephen, is it? It comes back to him visually, physically.
Constantly. Through these recurring images, sensory details of her death, it's very visceral.
And even the sea gets drawn into this maternal theme, but in a really twisted way.
Yeah, that happens with the famous handkerchief scene. Mulligan borrows Stephen's handkerchief, which is described as dirty and crumpled, hinting at Stephen's poverty and maybe neglect.
Buck calls it the bard's nose rag.
Right. And then he looks out at the sea and coins that incredibly famous phrase, snot green. He calls the Irish Sea the snot green sea, the scrotum-tightening sea.
Sorry.
Very Buck Mulligan. But then he adds, calling the sea our great sweet mother.
So there's the contrast. Buck celebrating the sea as this powerful, if crudely named, mother figure.
While Stephen, at that exact moment, is haunted by the memory of his actual dead mother. It's a devastating juxtaposition.
What does Stephen remember specifically?
He keeps flashing back to her deathbed scene, the smell of wax and rosewood from the coffin, her breath, which he imagines as this mute reproach, and critically, a bowl of green, sluggish bile beside her bed.
Which connects directly back to the snot green sea.
Exactly. It's all interwoven. He even remembers singing a Yeats song, Who Goes With Fergus, to her while she was dying and crying out. It's pure trauma, relived internally.
But it's not just passive suffering, is it? There's a fight in him, too.
Definitely. His final thought in that memory sequence is, no, mother, let me be and let me live. It's this desperate assertion of his need for freedom, to become his own person, his own artist. He feels he has to reject what she represents, tradition, the church, the claims of the past.
And all this heavy internal drama is playing out while he's basically broke.
Utterly broke. Mulligan teases him about wearing his secondhand trousers. Yet Stephen clings to wearing black mourning clothes, even though they're shabby.
Which Mulligan mocks, naturally.
Of course. He kills his mother, but he can't wear gray trousers.
Yeah.
It highlights the perceived hypocrisy. Stephen's poverty is real. He's waiting to get paid his tiny salary from his teaching job that very morning.
Money Buck probably wants to spend.
Buck's already talking about having a glorious drunk with it. So Stephen's internal battle isn't just about guilt. It's also this constant struggle for basic independence from people who seem to pity him, mock him, or just want to use him. Guilt, poverty, the fight for freedom. And that's the emotional core here.
So Stephen feels trapped, dispossessed, needing independence. This brings us back to that idea of him being a Telemachus deprived. The theme of usurpation seems central.
It really ties everything together. He's deprived because he lacks all the things the mythical hero had. No royal status or wealth. His guide, Mulligan, is cynical and mocking, not wise. His home, the tower, is rented from the colonizer.
He's trying to be free by refusing to serve God or tradition, but that freedom makes him vulnerable, right?
Exactly. He has nothing solid to stand on, which makes him easy prey for usurpers people trying to take what little he has, whether it's his dignity, his money, or even his identity.
And this gets symbolized incredibly powerfully in that scene with the mirror.
Ah, yes. The cracked looking glass moment. Buck holds up a mirror significantly, one he stole from the servant's room, the skivvy's room. He tells Stephen to look at himself, calling him the jejune Jesuit.
And Stephen's response is devastating.
It's one of the most quoted lines about art in the book. Stephen looks at the mirror and says, it is a symbol of Irish art, the cracked looking glass of a servant.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why a servant's mirror?
Stephen is arguing that Irish artists at that time were effectively servants. They were serving external masters, either the British state or the restrictive demands of the Irish Catholic Church, and maybe even the nationalist movement. They weren't truly free creators.
And the crack in the mirror.
That represents the distortion. Stephen was deeply critical of the Irish literary revival happening then people like Yeats, Lady Gregory. He saw their art not as a true reflection of Irish life, but as something, well, warped. introspective, maybe self-pitying, and ultimately submissive to those masters. It's a broken reflection seen through the eyes of someone not in control of the servant.
It's a massive critique of the whole cultural movement.
Huge, and Buck typically completely misses the depth of it. He just thinks it's a clever line he can repeat to impress Haines, the Englishman.
That really sums up their dynamic, doesn't it? Buck wants to use Stephen's brains but doesn't care about the substance.
Precisely. Buck then tries a different tactic. He suggests that he and Stephen should Hellenize Ireland, bring Greek learning and culture to it, make it sophisticated. He flatters Stephen, pretends to be scared of Stephen's lancet of my heart, meaning his sharp wit and potential to satirize him in writing later on.
It's all manipulation.
Pure manipulation. And the ultimate symbol of this power struggle, this usurpation, comes down to a very simple object. The key to the Martello Tower.
Right. We see Stephen earlier carefully putting the huge key in his inner pocket.
It's his because he paid the rent. That key represents his control, however fragile, over his current space, his temporary home, his omphalos, maybe the symbolic center of his world at that moment.
But Buck wants it.
Relentlessly. He keeps asking for it, making excuses like needing it to keep my chemise flat. But Stephen knows exactly what Buck wants. Control. To take over the tower, to usurp Stephen's place.
And Stephen eventually gives it to him, doesn't he, later in the chapter?
He does. And that act of handing over the key is just packed with symbolic meaning. It's Stephen surrendering his physical anchor, his small claim to territory, even before his day's journey really begins.
Before we get to that final handover, though, there's the introduction of Stephen's famous Hamlet theory. Buck brings it up to Haines.
Yes, and Buck describes it in this deliberately absurd way, making it sound ridiculous.
How does he put it? Something about proving.
By algebra, that Hamlet's grandson is Shakespeare's grandfather, and that he himself is the ghost of his own father. It sounds like pure intellectual nonsense, designed to baffle Haines.
But there's a serious idea underneath the mockery, isn't there? It connects to the whole novel.
Absolutely. It's central to Joyce's exploration of fatherhood, identity, and artistic creation. Stephen is obsessed with paternity because he feels he needs to reject his own biological father, Simon Dedalus, in order to become an artist, a creator in his own right.
So the theory suggests...
It suggests that the biological father is almost incidental. The real father figure, Stephen argues, is the spiritual father. He claims Shakespeare, whose own son Hamlet died young, became the true spiritual father to his creation, Prince Hamlet. It's like an artistic version of the father and son being one substance consubstantiality.
The artist creates himself, becomes his own father through his work.
That's the core of it. It ties into theological ideas, too, like the son striving for atonement, becoming one with the father. Haines actually picks up on this, clumsily trying a theological interpretation.
So even though Buck is mocking it, Haines's comment hints that this theory will be important later.
Exactly. It foreshadows the deep intellectual and theological debate Stephen will have later in the book, especially in the library episode. It's all about Stephen trying to forge a philosophy that allows him to be self-created, independent of his unsatisfactory real father. Masked by satire, it's Stephen laying the groundwork for his own artistic revolution.
This intellectual sparring is intense, but it keeps getting pulled back down to earth, doesn't it? Like in the scene with the milkwoman.
Oh, that scene is brilliant. It's maybe the sharpest piece of political and social satire in the whole chapter.
The milkwoman arrives, and Stephen immediately sees her as a symbol, right?
Yes, as Old Mother Ireland, an archetype. But his view is really complex, not just romantic. He sees her representing poor, rural, traditional Ireland, but also sees her as somehow barren, maybe backward-looking, not someone who can really nourish him, intellectually or spiritually.
And he has that striking thought when she pours the milk. The rich white milk, not hers.
That's such a powerful line about colonialism. The resources of the country, the very sustenance it produces the milk, it doesn't truly belong to the native people, like the milkwoman. It's controlled by others, by the colonial power, maybe by the church, or by economic forces she doesn't control. Old Mother Ireland provides, but she doesn't own the product.
And the cultural gap is highlighted when Haines tries to speak Irish to her.
Yes. Haines the Englishman, trying to show his appreciation for Irish culture, speaks Gaelic, and the old woman thinks he's speaking French.
Wow, so much for the Celtic revival connecting with the actual Irish people.
Exactly. It just underlines how disconnected those intellectual movements, especially when pursued by outsiders like Haines, were from the reality of ordinary, poor, Irish-speaking or not-speaking people.
And Buck Mulligan uses this for a joke, naturally.
Of course. Haines is talking about collecting folklore for a book. Buck suggests Haines should include this crude little rhyme about old Mother Grogan, her tea, and, well, her chamber pot. Buck elevates this bit of scatology to the same level as the sacred Hindu texts, the Upanishads, just to mock Haines's scholarly interest in authentic Irishness.
It's Buck basically saying, you're ridiculous for romanticizing this place.
Pretty much. But Stephen watches all this, and it prompts him to articulate his own feeling of being trapped, of being enslaved. He lists his masters.
This is a key moment. What are the three masters?
It's his definitive statement of oppression. First, he says the imperial British state, the political master. Second, the Holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church, the religious master.
And the third?
The third is more subtle. A third there is, who wants me for odd jobs, meaning Ireland itself, nationalism, cultural expectations, Ireland demanding his loyalty, wanting him to serve it, but offering him nothing. He needs no freedom, no support.
And he says this right after Haines offers him a cigarette.
Yes, from this fancy cigarette case Haines has, and Stephen notices it has a little green stone, an emerald, twinkling on it.
Another symbol.
A perfect one. Ireland reduced to a pretty, decorative, but ultimately trivial accessory for the Englishman. Haines then makes it worse by expressing his guilt, admitting the English have treated the Irish rather unfairly.
Rather unfairly, understatement of the century.
Right, and he blames it all vaguely on history. Just washes his hands of responsibility.
And Stephen connects this immediately back to his own guilt, doesn't he?
Instantly. He thinks of Anjambite of Inuit again, and then connects Haines's vague historical guilt to Lady Macbeth's famous line about the bloodstain. Out, damn spot. Out, I say. Yeah, sorry, no, the line is, here's a spot. My mistake. He's thinking, here's a spot.
Right, suggesting that historical guilt, England's guilt, isn't something you can just wash away by blaming history. It's a persistent stain.
Exactly. It's personal, indelible, just like his own remorse.
Okay, so the chapter's drawing to a close. The men are getting ready to swim. And the final act of usurpation happens.
Yes, the key. Buck asks for it again. And Stephen, realizing it's inevitable, maybe just wanting peace, or maybe seeing it as a necessary step towards his own departure, he gives it to him. He also gives Buck 2 pence for a pint of beer.
Handing over control.
Literally handing it over. And Buck's parting shot is pure mockery. He quotes Nietzsche, a philosopher. Stephen takes seriously, but twists it completely.
What does he say?
He who stealeth from the poor lendeth to a lord, thus spake Zarathustra. He's using philosophy to justify literally taking money from the impoverished Stephen. It's the ultimate insult. The wealthy, cynical usurper stealing from the poor artist. And as Stephen walks away from the tower, down towards the 40-foot bathing place, he hears Buck shouting his name from the water. And Stephen's final thought in the chapter, the very last word directed at Mulligan, is just usurper.
That one word sums it all up.
It seals the deal. The personal betrayal, the political symbolism, the mythological echo. Stephen has been formally dispossessed. He's now truly cast adrift, ready to start his own journey.
It's such a powerful ending to the chapter. Now, we've talked a lot about the themes, the characters, the symbols, but we should also touch on the style of writing itself. Telemachus is setting that up too, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. While the later chapters get way more wild and experimental, this first one is crucial for introducing Joyce's method, but subtly. It eases the reader in.
How so? It doesn't feel that straightforward.
No, but compared to, say, Sirens or Circe, it's relatively contained. Critics talked about the initial style here. The key thing is how it introduces that interior monologue, the stream of consciousness.
We mentioned Chrysostomos.
Right. It starts with these little intrusions, these moments where we slip inside Stephen's head without a big announcement like Stephen thought. It trains the reader to recognize when the perspective shifts inward.
So it's not like reading a diary, but the narrator's voice seems to kind of bend towards Stephen.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. There's a technique scholars call narrated perception or free indirect discourse, and Joyce uses it constantly here. The narrative voice itself starts to adopt Stephen's way of thinking, his vocabulary, his preoccupations.
Can you give an example of that? Where it's not quite internal thought, but feels like Stephen.
Sure. Think about when his black clothes are described. The narration might mention his coat having a fraying edge, but also calls it made of subtle theological tweed.
Theological tweed. That sounds very Stephen Dedalus.
Doesn't it? An objective narrator would just say a worn-out black coat. But filtering it through Stephen's mind, even the description of his poverty becomes intellectual, aestheticized, theological. The language itself tells you whose perspective is dominating.
So even the descriptions aren't purely objective. We're almost always seeing things through Stephen's rather intense, guilt-ridden literary filter.
Most of the time, yes. A truly detached, objective narrator is pretty rare in this chapter. And that forces us, the readers, to engage directly with Stephen's subjective reality.
And this is important because it sets us up for what comes next.
It sets us up for the massive shift when we meet Leopold Bloom in the 4th chapter, Calypso. By establishing Stephen's very instinct internal voice, learned, philosophical, obsessed with art, sin, guilt, Joyce creates a baseline. Then, when we switch to Bloom's mind,
It's completely different.
Bloom's stream of consciousness is much more, well, grounded. It's practical, observant, sometimes a bit pedantic, full of mundane details, scientific facts, bodily functions, advertisements. It's less about grand theories and more about, kidneys for breakfast and how soap works.
So Telemachus isn't just telling Stephen's story, it's teaching us how to read the whole novel, how to navigate these shifting consciousnesses.
It's like a reading lesson embedded in the story. If you can track the subtle shifts in perspective here, you're getting prepared for the much bigger leaps later on.
Okay, let's try to wrap up this deep dive into Telemachus. We've met Stephen Dedalus, this intense young man, the would-be artist, the intellectual prodigal son.
Yeah, and he's simultaneously achieved a kind of freedom by refusing to serve the church, refusing to pray for his mother.
But he's totally paralyzed by the guilt that comes with that freedom, that age and bite of inwit.
Right, and he's trapped by poverty, by his own intellectualism sometimes, and he's stuck in this really toxic environment with Buck Mulligan mocking him and the presence of Haines representing colonial power.
His whole struggle seems to be about breaking free from all these nets, as he called them, in a portrait nationality, language, religion.
And he does take a step towards freedom in this chapter by sticking to his guns, by refusing to compromise his principles, even about prayer. But the immediate result, he loses his home, he's dispossessed.
Sealed by that act of handing over the key to the tower.
That's the moment. He gives the key to Mulligan, the usurper. It's this profound moment of loss, but maybe also a necessary cutting of ties before he can really begin his own journey. He's cast out, which, is often the start of the epic quest.
So a tragedy of being kicked out, but maybe also the necessary start of his artistic path.
It's both. And that brings us back to that idea of the tower as the omphalos, the navel, the center of the world. The source material really highlights this. The tower is Stephen's starting point, linking him and the novel back to all these other traditions like an umbilical cord.
Okay, so here's the final thought for you, the listener, to chew on, building on that idea. If the Martello Tower is Stephen's omphalos, his symbolic center, what does it mean that he gives the key, control over that center, to the usurper Mulligan right at the beginning?
Yeah, what happens to the quest, the search for identity, the artistic journey, if the very starting point, the connection to home and tradition, is just surrendered, voluntarily given away before he even really sets out? Does the modern epic begin not with holding on to home, but with letting it go completely?
Something to think about. It really sets up the ambiguity and the challenges Stephen faces throughout the rest of June 16th. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the opening of Ulysses.
We hope it helps unlock this fascinating, challenging book.
We'll see you next time.